Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask a bunch of questions. You can also become a bitter pill at patreon.com/The Bitter Truth. My guest today is Neal Dikeman. He is a senatorial candidate for the Libertarian Party this year in the state of Texas. And we had a great chat the other day, and he's got a lot of ideas, and some I agree with, some I don't, but very, very intelligent individual and somebody that I think is going to give the main candidates, hopefully this year, a run for their money to kind of break this duopoly that we've got in the state of Texas, if not the entire United States. Neal, are you there?
I am, and it was actually great to talk to you the other day, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Excellent, man. I'm glad that you came on the show. Actually, I'm very grateful you came on the show. But let's just jump into it. Let's get into your background a little bit, and where you started and how you came to here.
Sure. Well, I'm a serial entrepreneur and venture capitalist by trade. I'm from Texas. I'm a sixth-generation Texan, actually, third-generation Aggie. My family's been here for 150-odd years, and we expect to be here for centuries to come. So we kind of take the long view. In my professional life, I actually, that's why I started running, to be honest. I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and the way the country's going, I kind of view my job in life is to make sure that when I wake up at age 80 and they look at me and they say, well, Dad, why isn't the world a better place, that I at least have an answer that says, well, I tried to do something about that. What are you going to do? And when I started getting real excited about politics last fall, it was really around the debt issues and the healthcare issues and many of the other fights that have been happening in Congress. And frankly, our elected representatives has simply been kicking the can down the road. And I'm just not okay with them kicking it down the road for another decade to my little girls. My little girls deserve to start life without an overhang from what we all did for the last few decades. They deserve to have the best shot just like we did.
Right. And this is your first time running. You've never held office before, correct?
It is my first time running. It is my first time active in a political party. This is about sending a message for that 3-year-old and that 5-year-old, for Gwen and Clara. I do not have to do this. I could stay at home and continue to run my businesses and continue to play with them. But life, like politics, is a participatory sport. And if you want to take the moral high ground, you got to get in the game.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, we talk about this all the time, and I'm vacillating, and I feel guilty for vacillating. I've been voting since I was 18, but I'm kind of vacillating. If does it really make a difference? Is it like that George Carlin joke? Is it my fault that the system sucks because I keep showing up to vote? So I understand. So
well, actually, I think the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
To be honest, the definition of insanity: keep beating your head against the wall and expecting different results, and then you're getting surprised that you're doing the same thing and getting the same results. Well, that's what we've been doing with our two-party system for decades. I don't always vote Libertarian. I vote Libertarian when our party ran good candidates that were in my particular ballot. Right. But that's not all the time.
Right.
And in between, you pick between the best candidates on the ballot. And unfortunately, the vast majority of America simply writes a straight party vote. And in Texas, that number can be as high as 2/3 is simply straight party vote. The candidates themselves are not getting airtime. And so what's happened is our political parties have literally started talking just to their little Republican echo chamber base on the right and the little Democratic echo chamber base on the left. And they've stopped listening to people like you and I that are in the middle or have views that cut across those partisan lines. And the vast majority of issues cut across partisan lines. And libertarian issues, there's not a single person in this country that does not side with libertarians on some of the libertarian issues. And there's a large chunk of the country that would side with libertarians on a large chunk of libertarian issues. But in the two-party system, you get what you get. And, we put actually.
No, finish. I'm sorry.
We actually put out a bunch of campaign cartoons. We do one every couple of days.
Okay.
And one of the ones that's probably been the most wildly popular is one we call Beer. And it's about a beer aisle. Imagine you walk into H-E-B and your beer aisle consists of 2 beers. One is red, one is blue. They both say beer. They taste the same, and neither of them are very good.
Right.
That's the way our politics is. You'd be mad. You'd think, frankly, you'd find another grocery store.
Right.
And, that's all we're really asking voters to do is start voting your conscience. Go into the voting booth. It's your vote. It's not the Republican vote. It's not the Democrat vote. I don't want you to walk in there and figure like you owe me that vote, just like I don't want you to owe the vote to anyone else. You need to make us all earn it. And
well,
need to make us earn it on our policies, not our label.
And isn't that
and
refreshing?
then, and only then, will those guys start listening to you.
Yeah, and that's actually, you know, almost revolutionary at this point, because both parties do this. The two main ones is they expect you to just confirm their coronation or confirm, you know, whatever. Like, you know, you owe them your vote. Otherwise, the whole country's going to hell in a handbasket. And it's that fear. It's that fear mongering, and that
it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
You won't vote for your first best choice because you're afraid your third best choice will win. So the second best choice always wins. That's what's been happening.
Right.
And worse, yeah, you and I both know our country, our political system has gotten heavily gerrymandered. The vast majority of the seats are pretty safe. And so the vast majority of the battles are fought in the primary, and the incumbent in primaries has a massive advantage. And the primaries are typically, the voters who carry those primaries are typically older. They're typically retirees. They're typically white. And they are a tiny portion of the population. And so by the time we get to the general, the die is cast for the vast majority of our politics. And what we need to do is start making the primaries less relevant and start making the general relevant. The third party role in American politics for 200 years has been to make the main parties listen when they're not. So
100%.
what you and I need to do here is start taking votes from the center of the political spectrum, or taking votes from each side and pulling them into the center, for those folks whose issues cut across party lines, and make the Democrats and the Republicans show back up in the middle and try and steal votes back from a libertarian. That's what we need to do, and that's the only thing that will make them start listening to you again.
Well, see, and I want to piggyback on that for a hot second, because I got some questions. I went on your website and looked up some things, and some of your POVs, points of view on some of these issues. But that's the thing that a lot of people like to forget. They like to forget that the 40-hour work week, child labor, women's rights to vote, 40-hour week, 8-hour day, all of that stuff came from third parties and or movements demanding, because power doesn't give to anybody. You have to demand it. And that's been the history of this country since basically the Revolutionary War. The entire country was begun out of demand. And so that's the thing where, to piggyback on what you said a second ago, and I'm sure you've done this a million times, if you take the name of the party away from an issue and just explain an issue to somebody, you're going to get an 80% agreement on that issue, whether it's green or libertarian.
This was the first thing that I did when we started to run, is I wanted to understand libertarians have gotten only a few percent of the vote over the years, and I wanted to understand, is my issue set, the one I believe in, a 2% issue set or a 50% issue set? Mm-hmm. And so we started doing research, and one of the things you find real quick is that people identify about as much libertarian as they do liberal or conservative, but they don't vote that way because they've been afraid that all they're doing is sending the vote to the other guy.
Right.
And since they think everybody else thinks that way, the system doesn't change. But when you look at the issue set, things as new to the political spectrum, if you will, as decriminalization of marijuana, which we got 37 states now in favor of it. Right? This is not an issue set that is a 2% issue set. Second Amendment rights are not a 2% issue set. Small government, not a 2% issue set. Local choice in government, not a 2% issue set. Now, not every single person believes every single thing that's sitting in the libertarian platform. But if you stack rank that against the Democrat and Republican, it's no worse than a third.
Well, and especially
we all know
with the Republicans and the Democrats, it's not even a third. It's you guys, the Greens, and then the duopoly. It's one giant party with those guys. They're not really a two-party system. They are one giant party. You've got the right wing who sort of believes in angels and doesn't like gay people, and then you got the other side that doesn't like guns but like gay people. That's it. The rest of it goes all the way down. Big oil, big pharma, big insurance, the Koch brothers. They donate to both parties equally. How did Nancy Pelosi become a 100-millionaire?
Spending has gone up under both sets of parties. No matter who was in control,
absolutely.
The Republicans controlled it all, the Democrats, or if it was split, the wars have continued.
Yep.
And the government has just expanded, and the social problems that the progressive left is concerned about and is driving that level of angst, and the trade problems and immigration problems and policies that the right is concerned about, they haven't gotten fixed in decades.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely ridiculous. I'm sitting here in 2018, and my health care is still tied to my job based on a tax deal done by the Democrats in the 1940s. Yeah, we had Obamacare added, and then we had attempts to repeal it, and both of them have left me with continued spiraling out of control healthcare costs.
Right.
And my health care still tied to my job.
Well,
which is morally
also,
bankrupt that my health care should be tied to my job.
I 100% agree. Well, here's the thing. And the ACA, which is a right-wing Heritage Foundation designed health plan that Obama passed through, still left 30 million people without health care. We still have 45,000 people a year dying in this country without health care. And yet everyone was freaking out when the Republicans' the attempted overhaul last year was going to kick off 24 million people off the rolls. I heard this huge hue and cry. And then my response back was, well, wait a minute. You didn't give a shit for 7 years that 30 million people already didn't have health care. Now you care about the 24 million people about to get kicked off? That's going to be a grand total of 54 million people, which means the plan wasn't a health care plan. It was a tax bill, basically. And John Roberts approved it as such when it went finally to the Supreme Court. And this is the kind of thing that people like to they like to ignore this. They like to ignore that both parties are complicit in this. And I get accused all the time, oh, you're trying to be a middle of the road guy. No, I'm not. I'm not. I am for single payer healthcare. I am for free college because I'm 54 years old. It was free when I went to school. It was $100 a quarter to go to my college. Now it's $5,000 a quarter. And for what? A degree that...
So that's a couple of separate questions in there. I'm definitely not for free college or single payer healthcare, but the problem you're identifying are a spiraling out of control healthcare cost and a spiraling out of control college cost, and both of those are basically originally driven by badly designed government subsidies. So the free market isn't actually working. We've got government interference in our educational system. It funds it on one hand,
the free market's
and then it loans us money on the other hand. And what that's allowed our colleges to do is expand out of control and dump the debt on our generation that's coming behind.
Right, because I
agree. My college costs a lot less than this.
Yeah,
I think the colleges today are maybe they're better than when you and I went, but they're not this much better.
No, they weren't. They weren't that much better.
Right? They're not that much worth of debt better. They're not bury you in a mortgage.
They weren't 500%. They're not 500% better than when you and I went to school.
And the same issue on healthcare. You know, single payer is the move that the left moves towards when it gets mad that we haven't gotten fixes for cost controls.
Which left?
Everybody.
Which left? The
cost controls and coverage.
Yeah, but which left? The pro corporate Democrat left? I mean, they're not left. Those guys are pro. Who got ACA through? The fucking Democrats when they had a majority in the House and the Congress. That was their thing, and Obama wouldn't even put in the public option, where the public option was at least a competition where you could get Medicare for a couple $100 a month and make big insurance compete with that. And he refused to put that in because his donors wouldn't allow it. And that's why he didn't prosecute us.
Right. And also they didn't put in any cost controls worth a damn.
Absolutely.
So the costs kept spiraling out of control.
Absolutely.
And to be honest, what drove me nuts about the ACA, absolutely nuts. If we get costs for healthcare going in the right direction, i.e. not through the roof every year, but less than GDP and inflation growth or headed down, if we make that deflationary, covering large swaths of America just isn't that hard.
Right.
There's many ways to do it, free market or not. If the costs are going through the roof, there's no way on the planet to do all that without bankrupting us. We're already sitting on our one public option today, Medicare. That program is functionally insolvent, and it is literally an albatross dragging down the American economy.
Oh, no. I'm going to stop you right there.
We are writing checks that our body can't cash.
Yeah, we're doing that with defense, too, by the way. $1.3 trillion a year.
We are, I agree.
And the corporate...
If you look at the twin albatrosses of defense and entitlement programs, and I'm not saying throw out all
I pay for Medicare.
That's not... What I'm saying is real simple. You cannot afford to throw the back end on my children. You do not get to dump hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt on my children because you want something today.
Okay,
you don't get to do that, and neither do the Democrats or the Republicans.
Well, hang on a second, because here's the thing, and I want to get into specifically your ideas to balance the budget, but I want to get this one thing out of the way and then get into your, because I want you to explain what zero-based budgeting is, and I want to get into some of these interesting topics.
Absolutely.
But the thing is with Medicare and Social Security, I've been paying that shit since I was 16 years old. That's not a fucking entitlement. That is unemployment. I pay into that when I had a job. I want my money. I want my money back. Then
you absolutely have, and you're not alone. The problem, the real problem with those systems, is twofold. But the big one that we're dealing with right now is you actually have not been paying enough to pay for all of the future benefits that you have been promised. And so we've been assuming that there's going to be more and more people to basically take up your slack. Well, that's great, except our birth rate has been falling and our immigration rate hasn't kept up. So as the result, our population's been aging as the baby boomers move through, and so we're sitting in a situation where we don't even have as many workers as we did before,
right,
and we haven't been paying enough per worker. So the system basically just didn't bother to tell you what the real price was, and the government just pretended that it was never going to have to pay that bill. Well, guess what? In the next 2 decades, when my little daughter is going to have to pay that bill, and that's not okay for her to have to pay for it, just because you wouldn't bear a high enough tax rate 20 years ago.
Okay, well,
now, is that on you? Because that it may not be fair to say that's your personal fault, but it's sure as hell not fair to say my daughter ought to bear that cost.
Well, listen, I got a niece and nephew. I got another nephew on the way. I got my friend's kids. I don't want to see them bear that cost. I mean. Yeah, I don't want to see them bear that cost either. However, it's about asking. This is the one thing the libertarians do that drives me a little bananas, and we could chat about this down the road, like table it, because I want to jump into the zero-based budgeting. However, the one thing the libertarians do that drives me a little bananas, we're not going to get a refund on any of this stuff. The money is already, the budget's already there. We're spending $1.3 trillion on defense. Why don't we ask better questions as a culture? I'm tired of the selective socialism. Hang on. I'm tired of the selective socialism of corporate America, where no one asks a question, not one whit, why we're bombing the shit out of 8 countries right now who have done nothing to the United States, no threat to our rights or freedoms or anything else. They're trying to saber rattle Iran and Venezuela right now for the oil. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia does 30 beheadings a week, and they're committing a genocide in Yemen.
The libertarians actually ask that question. We ask that all the time. That's a core part of the platform. And it's actually not a part of the platform that says libertarians are anti-defense. You find a whole lot of libertarians are actually pretty pro-defense. They're just pro-non-intervention.
Well,
or non-intervention.
I can spend $300 billion a year on defense in this country and eliminate like 75% of the bases. We have 1,300 of which that we know of. We don't know which is covert or whatever. We know that there's 1,300 bases in about like 100 and some odd countries right now, and we've got like 1 million troops deployed everywhere. My point here is that, China they just upped their budget to $225 billion. The country has 1.6 billion people. They barely upped their budget to $225 billion. They got one base outside of China. The Russians spend $65 billion on defense. We're spending $1.3 trillion. Why not ask a better question as a culture? Why not take $300 billion and chuck it at Medicare? And I'm paying a little bit more for Medicare, but I'm not paying for my health insurance, and my employer is not paying for health insurance.
Let's talk about budget. Because this is where because a lot of these things simply boil down to a cost allocation.
And I want to talk about zero. I want to talk about your zero-based budgeting. Is that what we're going to get into?
That's what we're going to get into.
Okay.
And I think it is actually absolutely fair for you to bring up defense when I bring up Medicare. And here's why.
Okay.
Because it's all one pile of money. Right. We like to pretend that it's in a whole bunch of different buckets. And some of it, like the Medicare and Social Security funds, we actually have been pulling straight from you and telling you as a citizen and worker, hey, that's money that we're earmarking.
Right.
But bottom line, since it's not paying for itself, we end up subsidizing that from the general funds anyway. So it's all intermingled. And defense. And then we sit in the budget process and we say, some of this stuff is laws we passed years ago, and so we can't change that. And they say that we have to have an increase in X category next year. We got to have that, or that pension for those government employees has got to go up, or what have you. Therefore, we can't stop paying that. Then some of it is defense, and we can't touch defense because, it's defense, and we don't want to look like we're weak on defense. And then some of it is entitlements, and we say, I can't touch entitlements. I can't do anything there because I don't want to raise any taxes and I don't want to cut any benefits. So you can't touch that. And then we have people like Ted Cruz standing up and whining and complaining and writing fake bills for things that are worth $20 billion when we are losing $600 billion, and then claiming they are a small government guy when they literally set aside 95% of the budget, call it untouchable, and then start whining about a small portion of the other 5%. This is what my church does.
Okay.
My church, and I got a great church, amazing people. And we have the same budget discussions that the government does. Year comes in, you actually don't quite know what your income's going to be because the pledges haven't all arrived yet.
Right.
Yeah, and so we sit around and we make our best estimate as to what our cost should be. And every department, they've got things they want to do, every team, so they come in and they say, we'd like to have an increase, 1 or 2%. We're not jumping up and down and trying to break the bank. They each want a little bit more. And I say, look, guys, it looks like pledges are going to come in a little light, so we may have to cut 1 or 2%. And they all say, okay, that's fine. And then property says, well, look, my utility bill, I can't actually do anything about it, and I think that's going up. And same with insurance. And the administration and personnel says, well, I don't want to let anybody go, and I'd like to give cost of living increases, so I'd like to add 1 or 2% just to those sections, which is fine, except those are 80% of the budget. So that means the rest of the budget, to balance it, would literally have to cut a quarter out of it. That's what we do in the federal government. We claim so much is untouchable that you can't solve the problem, and then we scream and argue about those tiny little crumbs that we all admit might be touchable, and then we just watch the deficits balloon. Had we done things as simple, and zero-based budgeting is one of the corporate techniques used for problems like this, you basically take every line item, and instead of taking what I did last year and saying, let's go up or down from that, you start at zero and say, do I need any of it this year? Mm-hmm. And you build it up from scratch. The other technique that you often do is you just say, look, the first cut of the budget is across the board. No increases in anything at all, even if they're permanent increases, even if they're things like that utility bill going up without a cut somewhere else. So you don't get to go above last year's at all until you've solved the where's it going to come from problem. Our government tends to do that on a piece by piece basis, but they ignore so many portions of the budget that they do it on this little discretionary bit, and they say, well, I'm going to take $5 from here to pay for the $5 I spent there, but they don't realize that 85% of the numbers crept up by 2% and swamped those $5. So when a Republican sits in front of you and says, we can't touch defense, and a Democrat sits in front of you and says, we can't touch entitlements, they've already done your budget. They just lied to you and told you they haven't done it yet.
Right.
But they just did 90% of the budget.
Right.
So there's no silver bullet here. We've got to go across the board, and to kind of put the proof in that pudding, we spend about $600 billion a year on defense, about $600 billion in losses in the Medicare and Social Security entitlement programs, and about $600 billion a year in the kind of the discretionary government stuff. All the things from EPA to DOE that you think about as government.
Well, let's back.
And our deficit is about that same $600 billion. And I'm rounding, so I know these don't all add up perfectly.
Right. No, I get you.
But what the thing is, if you wanted to solve the deficit problem out of the non-discretionary, out of that just the defense stuff, or out of the discretionary stuff, either or, you'd have to cut it all.
Okay,
like shut down the whole thing.
See, but here's the thing.
It's not credible.
Okay, but here's the thing, though.
If you solved it a little bit from every different part, and you said there are no sacred cows, nothing is sacrosanct, we're just not going up this year. In the last 6 years, since my competitors have been in Congress, because Beto O'Rourke joined in 2012, and so did Ted Cruz, in the last 6 years, our increases in federal spending across the board are about equal to our current deficit, which means had you just not let the increases ride, had you done the classic personal finance, bank your salary, we would literally be in the black right now with no pain.
Okay, back up a second. I want to correct you on one thing. According to Forbes, early last year, not long after Trump's defense budget was approved, which is interesting because not only did the Democrats who were saying he's crazy approve his defense budget, but they gave him an $80 billion tip a year on top of what he asked for.
Right.
So it's well over $700 billion. And according to Forbes, it's well over $1 trillion if you include covert operations, the nukes, and the VA. So that's like $1.3 trillion, $1.2 trillion.
Oh, hang on. Time out. The big number there is VA, because actually there's a massive hidden portion in the budget, which is basically pensions for government employees, and about 2/3 of that is actually military. Yeah, and so that's one of the things we say. Well, we can't touch it. And you're right. I have no desire to go take money away from people that went overseas to serve my country. 100%. But that's the same challenging logic is saying, well, if I can't touch that, what am I going to do?
It's not about touching that.
Hang on.
It's not.
Let me tell you how big that number is.
Okay, but let me make a point here really quick, though.
Federal debt.
Let me make a point here really quick, though. It's not about not honoring those who served. It's about not putting people in harm's way for nothing, which is we have done. And that's when I keep going back to the same thing over again. We don't We refuse to ask the question. We refuse to ask better questions, and this is why we're in the state that we're in. I'm not talking about getting rid of veterans benefits or any of that. I'm just saying if we had fewer people getting injured and coming back insane, maimed, or dead, then maybe we wouldn't have to spend as much money on the VA. Plus nukes, we don't need them. We're done. We got enough nukes. We got more warheads than anybody. Yeah, bases, don't need those either. We can ramp back defense, because I believe in having defense, because it's not a perfect world. But you can ramp back defense to $300 or $400 billion from the $1.2 trillion, and I'm talking about including everything.
So here's the open question. Here's the question you should be asking. We walk over and complain that our NATO members are not spending enough of their GDP on defense.
Another line of bullshit
we
Trump
are
gave us.
Still targeting our... Wait, hang on. That's a claim we keep making. We've made it under multiple administrations. It's not just the Donald.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. However, we don't ask the question, are you sure they're not spending a more appropriate level of their GDP on defense than we are? And then we look at who we're spending the money to defend against. And I actually took, went to pulling data, and we started looking at where the spending goes in defense globally. And one of the things that is striking is if you add up the American treaty allies and the Americans, and then you start, not people we're friends with, just people we literally have a defense treaty to go defend them and they promise to defend us.
Right.
We're well over half. We get to like 60%. If you add up treaty allies and friends, we're literally spending money to defend against our friends. I mean, that's where the cash goes. Well, and if you're sitting in the shoes of it's like 70% in the hands of our treaty allies and our friends or more. It's like, well, who are you defending against? What are all these bases for? Well, for defense. Defense against who? The guy across the river is literally committed to defending you just like you're committed to defending him. We're defending each other.
Well, here's the thing, though, and this is something you just brought up, NATO. When Trump was doing his stuff during his campaign that, NATO's got to pay their fair share, the NATO countries have to pay their fair share. That sounds great on the surface, but it's not what ended up being true. We made the NATO countries spend 2% of their GDP not improving their defenses, not building more bases, not recruiting and training more soldiers. We made them spend 2% of GDP buying American weapons. That's what he did. So even to get the NATO people to pay,
I gotta be honest. I don't really care what level they spend on defense.
I do care.
I care about the debts that we have run up.
Well, I'll tell you.
And I care about complaining that our level of spending is appropriate when we are literally bankrupting ourselves, borrowing 20% a year in order to fund that.
But to force the NATO nations to pay 2% of their GDP in American weapons does nothing but feed the selective socialism of the American war machine and corporate America. That's exactly what that is. So we're sitting there forcing NATO nations to buy American weapons and 2% of their GDP. That's 100% bullshit. And that's what I'm talking about. Asking better questions of the culture. I think
your math is a little tortured there.
No, actually,
but I think the question
the math is not
where you're headed.
Actually,
right.
Actually, the math is not tortured there. Specifically, the number was 2% of GDP of the NATO nations. That's the number. That was the number, 2%.
But they don't spend 2% of their GDP back in the U.S.
No.
We wouldn't have a trade deficit if that were the case.
No, but they're buying American weapons, which does not necessarily offset our trade deficit. It's a handful of corporations. Excuse me?
Well, that would absolutely offset the trade deficit, and the entire of NATO is not spending 2% of its GDP buying American weapons.
You can look it up.
I
didn't get this when I was stoned.
2% of GDP is the target. Is the NATO target for spending that all the allies have agreed to. We spend more than the others. That's
a new agreement. That under Trump, that's a new agreement. The NATO nations are required to spend up to 2% of their GDP on American-made weapons. Okay, that's not bolstering NATO. That's just feeding the selective socialism of the war machine. That's what that is. And we're not asking good questions as a culture. We're not asking.
That may have been Donald's little fairy tale view of the world, but that's not actually how NATO works.
Okay.
So I don't think it's fair to spend those arguments. What I do want to come back to is the point that I think you were very right to make, and that we can't leave. If we're talking social programs and not defense, we can't argue one or the other. We actually need to look at our budget holistically, and we actually need to ask the question, which you're really challenging your listeners to deal with, which is, why are we spending so much? Not, are they not spending enough? And then that comes back to the overall question of, well, what's the mission of our national defense? we're really running a 1940s, 50s, and 60s style mission. And frankly, we've got the same thing you do in any organization in our defense. We've got mission creep, and we got scope creep. And nobody ever wants to take anything out of there. So you don't shut down bases, you just add more. And so you just get scope creep. Yeah. Is any one of those items wrong? Well, you got to start at the top, figure out what you want to do, figure out how much, on a zero-based budget, figure out exactly how much resource you need to accomplish it, and then commit the resource. What you don't do is just take last year's, add 2%, add a few more bases, and say, therefore, I got to add another 2%, and they say, therefore, it went up by 4%, please give me the money. That doesn't work. And that's what we've been effectively doing. In fact, there are plenty of examples. You can go watch the hearings on Congress and read the literature on it. There's plenty of examples where congressmen will literally put things into the defense budget that the Pentagon doesn't necessarily want because they're benefiting that congressman's home base in their home state, and they don't want that spending cut. And what are you going to do if you're the Pentagon? Eventually, you give up and say, okay, fine, give me that money. So we're not even holding ourselves truly accountable for our own spending because we got multiple cooks in that kitchen.
Well, the Pentagon that have lost $21 trillion over the course of the last 18 years, which is interesting because our national debt is about 20.
It hasn't lost $21 trillion.
Yes, they have. That's documented, man.
That's more than our, over 18 years, that's more than our entire defense.
Actually, yeah, it is. And they lost it. And you could look that up. That's not just in, Abe's Gazette. New York Times reported on it. Intercept reported on it. A bunch of guys reported on it. I saw several interviews with the guy that broke the story. That is an actual piece of information that's a fact, not a theory. If I say that the moon landing didn't happen, conspiracy theory. This crap is a conspiracy fact, and we covered it up. And
that would be a conspiracy theory.
Actually, it wouldn't be a conspiracy theory because it fucking happened. And I'll tell you something else too. I want to back up on what you just said about the 2% NATO requirement of GDP to buy American weapons. That was in the New York Times last summer as well. The New York Times, by the way, a corporate-run fucking paper that does exactly as they're told. And all of a sudden, they're reporting on this, which isn't exactly favorable. So how is that like Donald Trump's fairyland?
So, because there's no NATO commitment to spend 2% of GDP on American weapons.
Says who?
There never has been.
There is now.
The treaty.
Then
Donald Trump cannot unilaterally redo a treaty.
Really?
That's not how the world works.
Really? Apparently the Iran deal was a treaty, and apparently we're reneging on that. So that's how the world works. Kyoto was a treaty. Obama got out of that. We've broken. We've broken treaties.
We did not ratify Kyoto.
We've broken.
We did not ratify Kyoto.
Oh, so that's why Obama got out of it without a problem?
Literally, we didn't. The Senate refused to ratify it, so it was never actually adopted.
So that's why
he signed. There's a difference between them signing it and the Senate ratifying it.
I'm asking you a question. So is that why Obama?
NATO is a Senate ratified treaty. The president can't just unilaterally tell the other countries we've changed the deal.
Well, he didn't unilaterally tell the other countries we changed the deal. We told the other countries that we changed the deal.
He can go tell them we would like you to do X. And they can or cannot agree, but a treaty is a multilateral deal.
Apparently, they agreed. You can look you can look this up, and then you can email me, and I'll gladly print a retraction or record a retraction on the next episode.
All right, sounds good. Let's move on to a more productive topic.
Well,
we're starting on budgeting, and I do think we want to. I do think one of the important points, and you and I actually have some common ground here, is one shouldn't approach our debt and our deficit from a single portion of the budget. You actually need to be able to, go across the board. 20 years ago, you could have just said, we're going to change defense spending, we're going to change entitlements, we're going to do one or the other. But we've run up debts that are functionally equivalent, both the on-balance sheet and off-balance sheet, of $340,000 per American family. That's more than your mortgage. That's now $14 trillion of that is the federal debt that we call federal debt. Another $7 trillion are those government liabilities that include heavily those military and civil service pensions that you were mentioning that Forbes kind of lumped in there, trying to sneakily describe as covert operations. It's not. For the bulk of that money is actually pensions and retirement and benefits for our civil service and our military.
And nukes.
And then so that gets you to $21 trillion that people talk about.
And nukes.
Then the other $22 trillion are Medicare and Social Security liabilities that have not been fully funded. It is literally the size of the entire national debt. And that amount is big enough to sink the country. That total is 12 times the entire government revenues.
Okay, so tell me, so tell me how Medicare and Social Security, that equals the national debt, yet we don't hear about that in the national debt amount coverage. It's always 21. When Bush took over.
This is why I'm running. This is what burns me up, because, and the guys I get this from, I'm not making these numbers up. There's an institute at Texas A&M where I went to school called the Private Enterprise Research Center. And there's some very, very good economists there, and they have literally been writing on this topic since the mid-'90s when I was in school there. Yeah, so I was actually taught about this in school. The problem then was bad, but their rationale, or their kind of pitch to Congress, and they've been up and presented to the Senate and everyone else. This is not new stuff. This is not stuff that our elected officials didn't know about. The problem that they kept saying was, look, the sooner you solve this, the easier it is to do with virtually no pain. The longer you wait to solve it, you kick the can down the road, the math starts, the pension math starts to work against you, and you're gonna have to bear some pain. And so they've been complaining for 20 years, hey guys, take your head out of the sand, and this doesn't cost us much. Take your head out of the sand, we'll be okay. Yeah, and instead we didn't. We essentially doubled down, and the liabilities kept growing. So this is basically the delta between the amount of funding that you've put in and the amount of benefits that the program has committed to you, given your normal, expected lifespan and what you're going to cost and all that.
Right.
Yeah, this is like the underfunded pension part, right? This is excluding the trust fund. The trust fund is kind of, some of the money that you paid in when it was the program was taking in more than it was sending out, it went into a trust fund, which was basically invested in government bonds, earned a little bit of interest. Well, we're exhausting that.
Sure.
This is basically the negative part of that trust fund, because the trust fund needed to be about 3 times bigger than it was in order for us not to run out of money. Yeah, and so now we're basically pulling that from the general fund, which was never the intention. Nobody would ever bother to either bring benefits into line or increase the taxes, and they're basically just hoping economic growth, or essentially more revenues and per person or more people in the economy, would help square the circle. But for 30 years, we've known that was not happening. It was moving the opposite direction. And just like the firefighters or the police pensions, you got to actually deal with it, and you're better off dealing with it earlier. Well, no one wanted to deal with it. And now within another decade, this chicken's coming home to roost. And this chicken is big, folks. So we not only have to pay off our $20 trillion in debt that we've run up and been talking about, we have got to pay from our expenses another $20 trillion in debt.
Okay, but
let me tell you what that looks like on our balance sheet. So our P&L. So we've been spending. Remember that gap from entitlements, what we collect versus what we send out, has been about a negative $600 billion.
Right.
Within the next decade, that triples to north of $1.5 trillion, all by itself.
Right. See,
but we got to fund that.
Okay, but here's the.
So we're either going to have to jack up taxes, or we're going to have to cut something else, or we're going to have to cut benefits, or we're going to pay for it in inflation.
But here's the thing, and those are the choices. This is why the two parties aren't paying for this. See, because we haven't even started paying in our taxes from the wars that Bush got us into. We've been doing it on a credit card for the last 17, 18 years. So people are like, oh my God, my taxes.
That's the right way to think about it.
Your taxes haven't even gone up yet, commensurate with what it's going to look like when they start making us pay for the credit card. Because we have not.
So let's deal with the counter argument that a good right wing analyst would give you right now when you made that statement. They would say, hey, you'd be right, except we're going to get economic growth and we're going to grow our way out of it. And they'd only be partially wrong. Right? It is a true statement. The question is how much. And the left analyst on the other side would then say, well, but that's trickle-down supply-side economics, and it's been proven that it doesn't work.
It doesn't.
And they'd be partially right and also partially wrong. However, here's where it gets very real for you and I. The CBO, Congress's own accountants, runs this analysis. And we passed our tax cut and our spending increase combination in the last cycle. And we passed it, and they passed that tax cut program days before the CBO could get out its estimate of the impact. And they did that on purpose because they knew the number, and they didn't want to discuss the number. And what the CBO said is they said, look, guys, basically the plan you gave us, and this assumes we do not make the tax cuts permanent. This assumes we do not, which the Republicans are intending to do. Right. So this is not even including that little boondoggle. The CBO says, look, guys, over the next decade, you are going to lose well over $10 trillion because the interest upon interest is getting bigger than it used to be. And you are not going to get enough economic growth to offset all of this. And oh, by the way, when you go run out 10 years and you add it up and you kind of look at that every year, what you find is we are literally going to lose more money at the government level, which is only 20% of our economy, than the entire economy is going to grow. And people, you cannot square the circle with economic growth when you're growing your debt faster than you're growing your entire freaking economy. It doesn't work. Yeah, and so I actually believe supply-side economics has some efficacy. Trickle-down is not a dumb idea. It just has to be moderated, and you got to look at the devil in the details. And in this case, the Republicans have run those details all the way into the ground and then backed over them 7 times.
Well, listen, trickle down has never worked. 86 to 96, Reagan's tax cuts have proven that wages were stagnant for that entire 10-year period. Hang on.
Government revenues were not.
Government revenue
and what you got to look at, when you're looking at trickle down, you got to get into the details and understand.
I'll give you an example.
Where are the tax cuts coming from, and what will those tax cuts benefit, and will they outgrow the cost?
Well, a quick side,
and there's a whole bodies of work on what's most effective when you're trying to do trickle down. I would personally argue my understanding of the economic research is that if you wanted trickle down to work better, you probably, in this last tax cut, needed more personal tax cuts and fewer corporate ones.
Well,
but
listen,
you didn't have that debate.
Listen, and Obama made permanent the Bush tax cuts, which people like to forget. But my point about this last round of tax cuts is that the same thing happened with every goddamn tax cut we do, which is the C-level guys use that to buy back more stock, rise the price of the stock. They get their bonuses. Very little job creation goes on, which is the argument for trickle down. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work. You don't see infrastructure builds. You don't see new jobs created. You don't see it. We still have 50% of people in this country making. Hang on. Hang on. You still see 50% of people in this country making under $30,000 a year because we schlepped their jobs overseas because there is no penalty anymore for government.
You realize I'm agreeing with you. We're already agreeing that trickle down is not the answer here. And what I'm trying to say is, the left simply argues trickle down completely bad doesn't work, and that's a fallacious argument. It's a matter of degree. The right argues it's a panacea. It's the fix-all. It's the cure-all. It's the Band-Aid. It's the everything. It's the all you can be.
Right.
The problem is this time the right actually doubled down on trickle down, and they did it in a way where literally the cuts were bigger than the entire growth. So the math doesn't work the math that they would have argued worked in the 80s when we were sitting at a quarter of the debt and where we were sitting with much higher marginal tax rates.
Okay.
Doesn't work the same way when you're sitting with, frankly, not very high marginal tax rates that we just slashed and sitting with really high debts.
Right.
Yeah, the math just doesn't work the same way.
And especially
but the left just wants to say, "Oh, you're wrong. We should have higher taxes." No, we don't need higher taxes. We need fairer taxes. We need taxes that are we need a balanced budget so debt isn't crowding out the economy, and we need to be paying for the programs that we're actually committing to before we start adding programs.
But you also, and I want to move, we got about 20 minutes left. I want to move on to a couple of other areas here really fast. But you also don't create a $1 trillion tax cut that is permanent, by the way, for the 0.001% and lasts 5 to 10 years for the middle and lower to middle classes. They're basically getting a cash advance on their tax refund. People that are like, "Oh, I got $300 more a month on my check. This thing must work." Yeah, let's see when you don't get.
All they did was hand you money
ahead of time.
All they did was hand you money now that they're going to take back more of in the future.
Yeah,
because they're borrowing too much.
Or
money.
You're getting a smaller tax refund. If you're used to getting $5-6 a year, suddenly you get $3,000. What happened? You knothead. We were giving you that money as a cash advance, so you're only going to get half of your refund. But the thing is, I want to.
Right. So that's actually a great way to think about it. Basically, what we just did was walk down to the payday loan store
Bingo.
And take out a cash advance at an interest rate that is going to kick our little butt. And then we went and told everybody, "Hey, guess what? I got a raise." No, you didn't. You just took out a payday loan.
That's right. It's like taking $10,000 on your credit card. It's like taking $10,000 on your credit card.
Here's,
right.
here's what drives me nuts from the progressive side. And this is why I say these issues all cut across partisan lines. The progressive side is saying things like, oh, one of our big fixes, one of the things we need to get done is single-payer health care. And I'm like, guys, the program we have is functionally bankrupting us, yet you want, instead of fixing it and talking about, let's go say, no, we can't cut taxes until we pay for our programs, you want to jack up a new program on top of
Okay, but hang on.
Or expand that one and not deal with the taxes either.
Hang on a second.
You're literally going to throw my daughter.
No.
You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You don't get
no.
We are sitting at $340,000 per family. I don't know about you,
I get it.
but are you ready to write that check?
No, and neither are you.
Because if you're not,
well, listen,
we need to deal with it.
Okay, you're a VC and you're a serial entrepreneur. You understand small business. You understand that 95% of businesses in this country are small business. 500 employees or less is what dictates the small business.
The engine of job creation.
100%. 100%. I do employee benefits for my day gig. Okay, I'm not a journalist. I'm not any of that. I'm just a guy with a fucking microphone interviewing cool people like yourself. But my point is this: if I got a 50-man group and he's buying health insurance, mandatory by the way, 50 lives or more, he's paying about $2 million bucks a year for those health plans. And the employees are paying $300, $500, $1,000 a month as their contribution. Like you said earlier, it's immoral to have your job tied to your insurance. And I agree with you 100%. Now,
that's a side of cost. That's a side. I don't want to run you out of a job, right? Because I know you're doing this for a living, but that's aside from the cost. I just consider it like I am a small business guy and I'm a venture capitalist, and it pains me when I know people who are stuck in a job that they don't like
because of the
and so they're
benefits.
not as productive as they should be because they don't like.
Okay.
Because literally they know that they cannot go home and tell their wife or their kid, "Hey, I don't have a plan to get us health insurance."
Right, but let me break down.
That's completely unacceptable.
Let me break down this number for you. So if I save that 50-man group, the owner of that company, I'm saving him $1.5 million to $2 million a year. And then I go to Johnny Lunchbox and say, hey, listen, that $300,000, $500,000 a month that you're spending for your contribution, you got that to keep. And your Medicare contribution, which we already take out of your check, you're already paying for that. We pop that up 20%. Now you're paying about $150 a month, not $300 or $500 a month. And you can get it now, not when you're 65. And then you're not looking at a 5 to 6 figure copay. If you do get sick, that's money that goes back into the economy. That's my point. So here's a great and you're headed down some positive points. There's a whole bunch of ways that we can deal with cost control in healthcare, and I'm going to give you the two kind of personal anecdotal examples. Okay. Yeah, because you're headed down some very, very interesting, important points. I got a lot of them.
Number one, there are a couple of known that's terrific. There are a couple of known fixes for cost controls. Right. One of them is you as the consumer, if you high deductible plans. Well, why do they work? Well, because if you got to write that first dollar check, and insurance companies have known this for years, you consume differently. Right? Probably better, but definitely differently because, well, you care. Yeah, and even if you're a good guy, there's only so hard you're going to fight with your doctor to protect your insurance company. But if it's your dollar, you have to fight a little harder because, hey, it's straight out of your pocket. Right. And it brings the price discovery there. So you actually even ask the question, hey, dude, how much is this going to cost? Yeah, even if you know you're going to do it anyway, you ask the question. The price discovery is crucial to establishing price controls. Right. So, but what we've now got in our last program, we basically codified the anti-high deductible, trying to get kind of everything built into that copay. And in reality, had we pushed high deductible is like a win-win. The insurance company literally knows there's found money to get if they can get an individual to be willing to do that. And some years ago, I switched our entire company, for the company I was at, from a fairly gold-plated plan to a high-deductible plan, and then we handed each of our employees a check for that difference. Yeah. Because I went and surveyed every employee and said, hey, how much are you actually spending right now? Let's actually see if the math works. And what we found is the math, it was free money. We could slash our costs on the backside because we were paying, I think almost all of the medical premiums there, hand our employees a check and stick them with a high deductible, and they were better off and we were better off, and the insurance company was just as happy. So that's one. Two, we've still got these to kind of get to this who pays issue. One of the problems with single payer is the same problem that we have with the insurance companies today. My dad's a veterinarian.
Okay.
And one of the things I grew up understanding was, frankly, the medicine's pretty much the same, except veterinary medicine is harder because you got a whole bunch of different species and breeds with all different sorts of problems. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the procedures are very similar, and the drugs are in many cases very similar.
Scary.
Right? So maybe they're even called different names, but it's the same drug. But you walk into that procedure in the vet hospital, and it costs a fraction as much. Now, some of them are procedures, hell yeah, there's just no way it's going to get that cheap.
Right.
Some of them is just basic stuff, like my dog has the flu, right? Yeah, or my dog has the the sniffles, or a broken foot. I mean, simple stuff that is easy to fix, right? But vet cost, and vets make good money,
Sure.
And the drug companies and the medical providers to vets make great money too. And a lot of the medicine very similar, but it costs a hell of a lot less. Why? Because when you walk into my dad's office and you say, I need X done, he can tell you what it costs now, and you agree to that before you say go.
Right.
If you try go into your doctor's office and ask them, how much will it cost? They'll tell you, number one, I don't know.
Right.
Two, it doesn't matter. Then they'll tell you, I can't figure it out until I ask the insurance company, which basically means their billing administrator has to stuff enough billing codes in there until they can figure out how to maximize their profits. Right. And you can't even get a price out of them. It is the only industry in the world. Hell, your auto repair guy can tell you what it's going to cost. They can give you an estimate.
Right.
They may try and cheat you on the back end, but they sure as hell can give you an estimate.
That's right.
Right? The doctors can do the same thing. The hospitals can too. They just won't. It is also the only industry in the world, if you walked into my dad's office or that auto repair shop and offered him two deals. So you say this is $1,000 and you got a plan where I pay it over 6 months. Hey, dude, what if I just give you the cash up front? How much? They say, how about $900 or some number, right? Mm-hmm. Every industry works that way. Cash on the barrelhead is king. Cash is king. In the insurance industry, if you walk into that doctor's and say, I don't have insurance, I would like to pay cash, and I'll pay up front. Just tell me what the number is. Not only can they not tell you what it is or won't, they will charge you more money because you are not working with that insurance company who's not going to pay them for 6 months.
Right.
It is the only industry in the world where cash comes at a discount. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, I got to pay more because I'm paying you now in cash. You drive down the road, you still see a few places that charge you different for credit and for cash on your gasoline. But your doctor thinks that he should take your cash and charge you more for the privilege of paying him upfront in cash. This industry, this is morally bankrupt. And it's all because you don't get to negotiate price with your provider. In fact, you don't even get to pick your provider. You know what you do. You get on your insurance plan's website and you try and figure out, okay, which doctors are covered by them so I can pick who to go to, as opposed to walking into the doctor and saying, tell me the price, and then getting the insurance to pay for it. They're all cutting their little special deals on the backside, then jacking up your costs and sharing the losses in between themselves and the profits in between themselves, and our costs keep going up because you have no ability, you have no choice to be able to go find a new doctor because they won't even take cash.
Right. And yeah.
I would very happily opt out of the medical system and go cash basis. I personally probably spend $50,000 a year out of pocket in cash on medical care in my household. That's not a lie. That's where the number comes out. I can buy a hell of a lot of doctor's time and a hell of a lot of nurse and a hell of a lot of hospital time and a hell of a lot of drugs for that. And frankly, the real insurance that I need, catastrophic insurance, things that I can't afford, just absolute disasters, cancer and the like, that insurance is dirt cheap.
See, but okay, really quick, because we got about 10 minutes left. I want to move on to a couple of other things, but real quick, you're making my point because I got a friend in Florida with a company of 200 employees who pays about $45,000 a year with 4 kids, and then he's got issues where he's gone to urgent care. Oh, we don't take your insurance. I'm paying $45,000 a year, and you don't take my insurance,
and you won't even see me. Exactly.
Right. So what the fuck is that?
All I want to do is allow your friend and you. I want you and me as a household to be able to consume like that, not have to run through your business. Because I definitely don't want your friend having anything to do with the medical expenses and the medical records and all the medical issues of his employees. That isn't his freaking business. It's not the government's business, and it's not his business.
Listen, and that's a good.
It's your business.
And that's a good segue. I got a simple question first, and I want to jump into some privacy stuff really quick, and then I want to have you come back on during the summer because as we get closer to the general, I'd love to have you come back on and talk about how you're doing and everything else, and if these decrepit assholes are allowing you to be in the debates and all of that kind of thing. Because my next question was. And this is me being naive. I've been here 3 years from LA. I wasn't paying attention to Texas politics until I moved here. And I voted in every election since I've lived here. Thank God Texas makes it easier.
Right.
But question, for example, I looked up Beto O'Rourke, Robert Francis O'Rourke. I looked up Rafael Cruz, both of whom, try to acquiesce in different ways, but they have the same exact voting record, except for like women's rights. I mean, Ted Cruz might be a Christian jihadist, but they're the same fucking guy. So, and I voted for Sam Hernandez in the primary against Beto or Robert O'Rourke. And so, you're running, you got the nomination for the Libertarians. I don't know if the Greens have anybody. So it's basically just
they
okay. So it's you, really.
It's just me and
those two guys.
It's me. I am the third party choice. I am the guy who's representing the voice of America in the middle in the Texas in what is the largest third party race in the United States.
So what
this is the largest, most high profile, highest money spending race. We're at.
So you're talking. So what are you gonna do in the debate? What kind of points are you gonna make? Because I want to get into privacy and all of that. We might have to do it next time. But I want to hear what you've got to offer. It sounds like you got. Excuse me, whether or not I agree with you, and I know we agree on a lot of things, and I push back on a lot of things, but I like you, and I like the fact that you are intelligent. You put out a cogent argument on everything we've talked about, and I appreciate that. Whether or not I agree with you on 100% of the things, I respect the fact that I believe you. I don't have to agree with you on everything, but I believe you, and I believe that you know that you're right, and you're not selling out, and you're not doing it because of some. It just doesn't sound like you have this agenda past what you believe is good for the people. Whereas I don't think these two guys are that way. And so if you're in a debate with these guys, like what are some of the points? I know you can't really get into questions you haven't heard yet. So, what are some of the points that you want to make to differentiate yourself from these two guys?
So I come from a business background, and I've founded 7 companies. When I want to make things happen, I make things happen. I actually don't care about their voting records, to be perfectly honest, because the vast majority of the bills that come up they're fake bills. They don't pass. These people literally make up bills in order to make themselves look good in the next election, and the leadership decides which bills are going to get the floor based on that. That's not the way I do business, okay. Right? I send you to Washington. I pay you $174,000 a year as a senator. I expect results, right? I expect you not to bankrupt my country. I expect job number 1. You need to balance a budget. Hell, you need to pass a budget. No more continuing resolutions. Ever. Right. Full stop. Right. You need to pass a budget, you need to balance it, and you need to handle your debt. Do I think you need to balance a budget forever? Well, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have told you had to balance every year. This year, you run up so much debt, so you need to start throwing off some cash flow to manage it, because, son, you're about to be in trouble. Number 2, cross-party lines issues, things like immigration. Immigration reform has been on the table my entire voting career and hasn't been dealt with. Tax reform, not a bunch of tax cuts that bankrupt my back end, but actual tax reform. I can't do my taxes anymore because I can barely make it through the forms, and I'm not a dumb guy.
No, I get you. I get it.
Ridiculous.
I pay.
Absolutely ridiculous.
I'm not at your level.
I
pay
healthcare.
I'm not at your level on taxes. I get a guy to do it every year because I can't do it.
No, I get a guy to do it every year. Not because it's not about how much. It's about how complicated. Right. Number 3, healthcare. I consider it morally bankrupt that both of our main parties have had shots at fixing this crap that we call our funding system. I think healthcare in the U.S. is great. We have amazing doctors. I'm very excited about the people taking care of my daughters and myself. These are great people, great hospitals. I just want to be able to work with them directly and not get screwed by the government or by the insurance company when I'm trying to take care of my daughter. That's what I want. And frankly, as I've told healthcare providers before, if I knew exactly what the price was, and if I knew exactly that they were going to be taken care of and it was all going to be okay, do you really think I'm price sensitive when it comes to my daughter? Seriously.
Nope.
Do you really believe that? No. What I don't like is you jacking me around, and what I don't like is you blaming it on the government or the insurance company when you're standing in front of me and every other service provider in my life, and me when I'm a service provider, you say, yes, sir, and you take care of the customer. It's customer-centric behavior, right? Yes, I want my government to be customer-centric, and I want these industries that they're bothering to regulate and telling me they're regulating for the good of me to be customer-centric. And the first of those starts with portability. You need to get this unwound. No more Obamacare, ACA fixes, repeals, whatever, unless you actually deliver a real program. You deliver something where it's not tied to my job. You deliver something where cost controls are in, and you deliver something where I have a choice, not you. I'm not interested in some government bureaucrat having a choice in who gets to run the single payer and who gets to shove the drugs through at what cost. I want that choice. I'm not interested in some insurance company getting that choice. It's mine. It's my daughter, my children, my family, my wife and I will take care of them. We will figure it out. We'll take the onus on us. But right now, these guys have taken that choice out of my hands. Number 3, privacy. I grew up in the tech world. In fact, my first email was a yahoo.com email address when I was in college looking for a job, so I'm not a digital native. I'm a little older than that. And then 36 months later, I was running business development for yellowpages.com and the parent company that owned Yellow Pages. Right? This was a whirlwind. The tech today is light years ahead of where we were at the .com.
Oh, yeah.
Light years. Yeah, it is amazing and cool and dangerous. Yet somehow in today's world, we have all this more tech and data and privacy issues and challenges and opportunities. We have a government which seems to have forgotten that it does not have the right to walk into my house or my data and pull my stuff without my permission or a court, or a warrant. Then we have a government that allows things like my medical health records, which are becoming existential to me, and my FICO score, which the government subsidized funding system uses to determine which house you and I get to go purchase. The data in that, I don't even know.
See,
we've got a government that is part of the problem, not part of the solution. We've got the EU leading on privacy. It's the freaking EU. It shouldn't be leading on anything. We should.
Well, okay, I didn't want to get into this right away because I thought I would wait till next time, but you already brought it up. Because you're talking about
we may have to, but that's okay. We'll touch on it.
Okay, but so National Privacy Act, for example, everything you're talking about is a symptom. I like to say symptom of HIPAA, FACTA, Gramm-Leach-Bliley, the Sarbanes-Oxley. I mean, would you agree that those are effective or not effective? I think they're not effective. Am I wrong?
I think in almost every major system we've got, whether it's tax code, whether it's healthcare code, immigration code, we have got a jumble of badly written laws that are interacting together even worse to create a mess for you and I to deal with, and our elected officials point fingers at each of them points fingers at the other party and refuses to work the problem to a good solution because they think it'll hurt them politically in the next election. I got news for you. If I wanted to be a little power broker and make an easy pass to win, I'm in Texas. I'd run as a Republican. I want to send a message and make a difference. I'm running as a Libertarian because these issues and these principles matter, and I'm not going to be out for my next election. There are not going to be any fake bills passed so I can tell you I voted for a tax cut that didn't have a chance in hell of getting through because it only had 40% of the votes counted when they passed the thing, and the leadership just stuffed it through to make themselves look good. I am there to get results. I expect everybody else around me to get results. I expect the people I send there to get results. There are 28 million people in the state of Texas. There's a lot of amazing, amazing, hardworking people. There is no way that these two guys that have been there for the last 6 years in a completely failed and polarized and, frankly, just toxic environment are the best Texas has to offer. So I believe I have the best track record outside of working for the government, which I've never done. I've got the better track record than either of these guys. I get results in everything that I do. I will get results here. And if I don't, then you need to kick my ass out in 6 years and replace me with someone who will. Doesn't even matter if I didn't get results because I was not competent or because I didn't try or because I couldn't get the job done with my colleagues in the Senate. It doesn't matter. If you can't get results, you need to get replaced with someone who
100%.
can. You would not let one of your employees go 6 years, completely fail, and then say, well, I'm going to keep you on because you're a good guy. You'd look him in the eye, you'd shake his hand, and you'd say, you know what, Neal? Look, you're a great guy, and I think you're going to be very successful somewhere else. But whether it's my fault or your fault, it's not working out here. I got to make a change because we're dying.
I get it.
And when we're sitting at $340,000 in debt per American household,
well, and
$340K.
well, and
at this level, we got no more room for error. We can't afford more of these guys. If they can't even recognize that's a problem, they've got.
Well, they're not doing the math, and as we wrap up, I'll leave you with this little basic math that I did about 2005 because I was bored on an airplane, and at the time my phone wouldn't handle this kind of a number. So I decided to figure out what $1 trillion was because I always heard these stupid analogies. If you stack.
Hard to do that on your phone.
It wouldn't work. So I did long division, and now my phone can handle it, and I was actually correct. But before you do if you stack hundreds to the moon, that's $1 trillion, whatever. If you actually take numbers that make sense, if you were born on the same day as Jesus, the book and the movie and the sandwich, that guy, If you were born on the same day as Jesus and I paid you $43 million a month until this past Christmas time, that's $1 trillion. So that's $43 million a month for 2018 years. That's
the classic one was $1,000 a day since the day Christ was born. You still wouldn't have $1 billion.
Okay.
And we're talking $1 trillion. That's the way I was taught to put that in perspective. You're right. It's important to put it in personal perspective. That's why I calculated. It's not fair to say every house owes that amount of money. That's the calculation. We got 110 million households in America, and we have 43 trillion in total liabilities, including all the things I've said, and we have another 10 or 12 trillion coming on top of that. So if you want to get down into the weeds of that secret, the corporations pay about 25% of our total income taxes, so maybe you can take that off the top. You can make some adjustments. But you also could make an adjustment for the fact that only half of all American households actually pay income tax because the other half are below the threshold. They pay into Medicare and Social Security, but they don't, which has been underfunded, but they don't pay for the general funds.
Right.
So you can cut it any way you want. And you know what? 10 years ago when these numbers were a third what they are now, hey, I'm okay quibbling, nickeling, and diming, what have you. But when we're talking bigger than anyone's mortgage, you just got to stop messing around with the stuff at the edges and just say, hey, guys, no more time. Fix it now.
Yep. I
don't care what your problem is. We have another 10 years. In the next 10 years, if we bring costs at the government level down by roughly 1% a year for maybe 5 years, and if we get that entitlement gap closed, and there's numerous ways to do it, doesn't necessarily mean tax increases, benefit cuts, what have you. There's numerous levers to pull there. Yeah. But if we get that gap closed so it's no longer a drag on the general funds within the decade, and 1%, just 1% per year, that the whole government says, I'll live on 99 points less each year for 5 years. If you do that, we're out of this debt crisis. If you wait another 10 years and don't, and we run another 10 or $12 trillion up, at the end of that 10 years, this math doesn't work quite so well. You're going to be looking at ugly tax cuts or tax increases, benefit cuts, or inflation to deal with it. So we still have time to run a no harm, no foul type of plan if we work together. We don't have any more time to point fingers, fight about it, and run up a whole bunch more debts and then try and dump it on my daughter, because then I'm going to be mad. And it's going to be more than just kicking your little butt out of office.
Right. Well,
right. You don't get paid $1.74 million over the next decade in order to run up debts that my daughter cannot afford to pay off without her grandfather writing that check.
Well, and
right, that's not cool.
It's not cool. And listen, on that cheery note, folks, I've got to wrap up. Our guest has been Neal Dikeman. He's running for Senate in the state of Texas. If you live in the state of Texas, do what you can. Get on his Facebook page. Links will be attached. Excuse me. To to this episode, and also just know that this is not like the national debates. I mean, we can help him make a splash, make a point. Some of you may agree with him 100%. Some of you may not agree with him 100%, what have you. But what you can't deny is that he's at least being honest with you and telling you exactly what he thinks, not what he thinks you want to hear. And if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, folks, it's supposed to. So you sleep tight.